Ladies and gentlemen, could I ask you to take your seats as we're going to get underway in a couple of minutes, and could you please turn your mobile phones onto silent? We'd be very grateful if you wouldn't take flash photography during this session. Please put your phones on silent, take your seats, and we'll get underway in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
I'll get some more. To take their seats now as we are about to start, and could you please switch off your mobile devices? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in welcoming to the stage Katharina von Schnurbein, the European Commission Coordinator on Combating Anti-Semitism and Fostering Jewish Life.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Honorable Baroness Schlusny, dear Regina, I welcome you on behalf of all survivors of the Holocaust present here tonight as we gather to pay tribute and remember those who were murdered and those who survived the atrocities, the persecution, and the systematic murder of the Nazis and their collaborators. I welcome Vice President Margrethe Skinas, responsible for the promotion of the European way of life, State Secretary Leroy, on behalf of the Belgian EU Presidency, Sarah Lustig and Ambassador Teresa Gras, co-chairs of the Croatian Presidency of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, Sergej Lagodinsky, member of the European Parliament, on behalf of all members of the European Parliament present here, and Ambassador Dani Dayan, chairman of Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Center. It is also a pleasure to welcome representatives of the Jewish community from across Europe and ambassadors from 15 states, including Chaim Regev, the ambassador to EU and NATO of the State of Israel, and Mark Gittenstein, ambassador of the US mission to the EU. I also welcome Martin Kotthaus, ambassador of Germany to the Kingdom of Belgium, on behalf of all ambassadors of EU member states present. Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues and friends, good evening. This is the second Holocaust Remembrance Conference organized by the European Commission, and it is becoming a good tradition for our institution to officially mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and this, the 79th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi extermination camp Auschwitz-Birkenau. I wholeheartedly thank our partners in this conference, the Belgian Presidency of the Council, the Croatian Presidency of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and major Brussels-based Jewish umbrella organizations with whom we work very closely throughout the year. You will find their names on the program. And I particularly thank the Belgian Presidency for allowing us to gather here in your premises, the Residence Palace. Thank you very much. Before I ask the speakers to the floor, allow me a little bit of housekeeping. Our Holocaust Remembrance Conference is live streamed, and I welcome also those watching online. Because the conference is live streamed, we would like to make you aware that participants may be filmed and photos may be taken, also here in the room. And if participants themselves would like to take pictures, to please not use a flash. Finally, there is French, Italian, and Spanish interpretation, and you can find the headsets in your arms. So in case you need translation, please do so. Now it is my great pleasure to welcome Margaritis Skinas, Vice President for Promoting the European Way of Life, for his keynote speech to open this event. Please, Commissioner.
Minister, member of the European Parliament, ambassadors, colleagues, and friends. Last June, I had the honor of visiting Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center in Jerusalem. Chairman Dani Dayan, who is joining us today, guided me through the Valley of Communities, retracing the tragic journey of millions of Europeans from Cologne, Rome, Marseille, Warsaw, and hundreds of other European cities and villages across our continent. This was a journey to death, organized by the Nazi regime. I was profoundly touched by the countless personal stories of the victims, meticulously reconstructed, preserved, and presented. Stories like that of Eli Sides, a compatriot of mine from Thessaloniki, who was murdered in the Shoah together with his wife, Sarina. Eli wrote the last letter of his life from the Thessaloniki ghetto to his daughter and son-in-law, on 5th of April 1943, hours before his deportation. Like so many others, Eli and Sarina did not know the destination of their transport. They were told that they were going to be resettled in Poland, and in the letter, Eli asks his son-in-law for addresses of people that he may know in Krakow so that he can contact and work with them. All I can say is that we will be apart for a long time, he writes, and asks, hug our beloved children for us and tell them about us so they don't forget us. Earlier today, this letter came back to my mind as I was taking the iWalk tour in the center of Brussels, listening to the stories of children hidden during the Holocaust. Children like Regina Slusny, who is honoring us today with her presence. Dear Regina, thank you on behalf of the European Union for your tireless work and for finding the strength, the moral and physical strength to recount your story and that of your husbands, doing it so beautifully, so convincingly, not only to us, but also in schools across Belgium. Stories like these are testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to the triumph of hope over despair. These are also European virtues and values. They provide us with a moral imperative to keep fighting for a world free from anti-Semitism and hate. And nowadays, this fight is more crucial than ever before, as we witness an old evil resurfacing in Europe. Since last year's conference on Holocaust Remembrance, our world has changed. The heinous terrorist attack by Hamas against Israel on 7th October shook us all to our core. Not since the Holocaust had so many Jewish lives been lost on a single day, and with such brutality. Europe has stood on the side of Israel's rights to self-defense, in line with international law, and has called from the very first day for the release of all hostages immediately and unconditionally, without any precondition. The impact of this devastating terrorist attack, of course, reverberated beyond Israel, in Europe and across the world, offline and online. We have been witnessing an unprecedented spike in anti-Semitic incidents. Jews, once again, live in fear. And this is not part of the European way of life. This cannot be. It is incompatible with what the EU stands for and the model of society we represent in the world. That's why we have to act, and we have been doing this immediately and decisively. Only days after the attacks, I personally visited to encourage and support our Jewish communities in Strasbourg, in Antwerp, in Thessaloniki, and also in overseas trip from Sao Paulo, Brazil, to Melbourne, Australia. And the message was very clear. Europe stands by our Jewish communities. They are not alone. And the College of Commissioners on the 6th of October, we adopted a communication entitled No Place for Hate, a Europe United Against Hatred. We have significantly upscaled our actions to support the Jewish communities and the wider society and to defend our democratic values. We are making new dedicated funding available for the security of the Jewish communities, aimed at complementing member states' efforts to ensure the protection of Jewish people, but also Jewish places of worship, schools, and community gatherings. And we are stepping up decisively our action to combat hate speech and false narratives online, notably through a new regulatory tool that we now have at our disposal, and it's called the Digital Services Act. Recently, we have opened formal infringement proceedings against X, formerly known as Twitter, to assess possible breaches linked to risk management and content moderation. Of course, we are not starting from zero, but building on our landmark EU strategy for combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life of October 2021. 2 years since the adoption of this text, of this strategy, I'm really proud to say that we have managed to produce a set of concrete, tangible outcomes. Member states are now progressing in formulating and implementing national strategies against anti-Semitism. Jewish civil society representatives are better prepared and supported to take an active stance. Initiatives promoting Jewish cultural heritage are multiplying in Europe, including through the establishment of a new European award. And life in certain Jewish communities in European cities is again beginning to flourish. So, is this the end of the story? Certainly not. We have a lot still to do. And I would like not only to sincerely thank you and your organizations being represented here tonight for helping us bring the strategy to life, but also ask for your help to continue fighting this fight and assure you that we are determined to make a difference when it comes to Jewish life in Europe. Preserving the memory and the lessons of the Shoah was and must remain the starting point of everything we do together. We have seen over the last years multiple attempts by enemies of democracy to instrumentalize the Holocaust and fuel Holocaust denial, distortion, and trivialization. Russia's invasion of Ukraine exacerbated these false narratives. As we prepare to mark the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, let us all make a collective pledge, a promise to redouble our efforts. On the side of the Commission, we have increased funding for projects on Holocaust education and remembrance. We are now launching an open call for tender for the amount of 3 million euros to establish a secretariat and develop a Europe-wide network of places where the Holocaust happened. Not only camps, but also railway stations, ghettos, places where children were hiding. We are contributing with further 10 million euros to an important initiative in the Valley of Communities at Yad Vashem, focusing on Jewish history in Europe before the Shoah. And we are developing our EU network of young ambassadors to promote Holocaust remembrance. This is an EU-funded project led by the Mémorial de la Shoah in partnerships with key institutions such as Caserne d'Ossin here in Belgium. And I take this opportunity and the presence of the minister here with us to assure everybody that we'll be working actively together in the coming months with the Belgian Presidency of the Council to step further action here in Europe but also with international partners, such as IHRA, UNESCO, and the OSCE. And I would like to thank both the Belgian Secretary of State, Leroy, here present, and the co-chairs of IHRA Presidency for their support and contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, as we pay tribute to the millions of children, women, and men, fellow Europeans who perished in the Holocaust, as we honor the last remaining survivors who courageously continue to tell their stories, let us be resolute in our pursuit of building strong foundations for a work that rejects hatred and embraces diversity. Let us spare no effort in combating the scourge of anti-Semitism and fostering awareness, understanding, and peaceful coexistence. Our commitment should extend beyond this solemn day as we continue to strive for a better world, a world where the atrocities of the Holocaust remain an aberration in history rather than a harbinger of mankind's capacity for cruelty and failure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vice President, for these very personal and also encouraging words. It is now my pleasure to welcome to the floor the Belgian State Secretary Marie-Colline Leroy, who a few days ago actually announced the interfederal mechanism to fight anti-Semitism, which is an important step forward, and I commend you for this. We really welcome this step and look forward to these actions that will follow.
Thank you very much. Monsieur le Vice-président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants des communautés juives et roms, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers invités. Je tiens à remercier vivement la Commission européenne, l'Alliance internationale pour la mémoire de l'Holocauste et toutes les organisations impliquées dans cet événement. Il était très important pour la présidence belge de l'Union européenne de commémorer la Journée internationale de la mémoire de l'Holocauste et de réaffirmer notre profond attachement au devoir de mémoire et à la transmission de la mémoire d'une génération à l'autre. L'Holocauste est l'un des chapitres les plus sombres et déchirants de notre histoire. 8 décennies plus tard, il continue à défier l'entendement et à frapper nos consciences. C'est aussi précisément parce qu'il défie l'entendement qu'il est particulièrement important de se réunir comme aujourd'hui pour nous en souvenir ensemble, pour veiller à ce qu'il ne soit jamais oublié et que la mémoire se transmette pour continuer à nous questionner sur ce qui l'a rendu possible et pour faire tout ce qui est en notre pouvoir pour que jamais plus il ne se répète. En tant qu'État membre de l'Union européenne, la Belgique, qui a connu l'occupation de l'Allemagne nazie, accorde une attention particulière à la mémoire de l'Holocauste, y compris au rôle de l'État et des autorités publiques dans la collaboration avec l'occupant. Durant la Seconde Guerre mondiale, la communauté juive de Belgique a connu des ordonnances, des rafles et enfin des rassemblements à la caserne d'Ossin avec pour destination le camp d'Auschwitz. Nos historiens référents ont mis en évidence il y a quelques années la docilité des autorités de notre pays face à l'entreprise nazie. Et notre gouvernement a présenté et réitéré ses excuses à la communauté juive. Mais le travail de mémoire doit pouvoir se poursuivre. Des éléments de l'histoire, en effet, manquent encore, comme le montre de manière symbolique un impressionnant mur de portraits de photos retrouvées de déportés sur 5 étages au musée de la caserne d'Ossin. Visage sans nom, nom sans visage. Je salue l'invitation du musée à compléter ces éléments, ces trous de notre mémoire. Il est aussi de notre devoir de poursuivre le travail de mémoire sur nos responsabilités. C'est dans cette optique qu'une enquête indépendante sur le rôle de la Société nationale des chemins de fer belges, la SNCB, a été lancée par le ministre de la Mobilité, Georges Ilquinet, et le Sénat belge. Entre 1941 et 1944, les chemins de fer belges ont contribué sans broncher et contre fracture à la déportation de plus de 25 000 juifs, plus de 300 Roms et de 16 000 prisonniers politiques vers les camps nazis en Allemagne et en Europe centrale. D'ores et déjà, ce travail contribue à une meilleure documentation et compréhension de notre passé. Nous ne devons pas tourner le dos aux ombres de notre passé, ni passer sous silence la lumière qui peut rendre l'espoir dans l'humanité. Cette espérance, nous la retrouvons notamment dans l'histoire du 20e convoi belge à destination d'Auschwitz, qui fut l'objet d'une action menée par des résistants en vue d'en libérer les déportés juifs, dont 231 parvinrent à s'échapper. Cette connaissance pleine et entière du passé, des ombres comme des lumières, nous renvoie à notre engagement à ce que l'histoire ne se répète pas. Où que ce soit, à l'égard de qui que ce soit. Ce devoir de mémoire nous renvoie également à notre devoir de garantir les droits humains, ici et ailleurs, dont le droit à la sécurité et à la sérénité. On le sait, ces droits souffrent ou sont foulés, ici et ailleurs. Depuis le 7 octobre, des milliers de vies innocentes ont été enlevées en Israël et à Gaza. Depuis le 7 octobre, les populations juives connaissent à nouveau la peur dans le monde, en Europe, ici et en Belgique. L'importation du conflit au sein de la Belgique et de la société belge et européenne est une réalité qui a un impact concret et mesuré, notamment par les organismes de promotion de l'égalité qui reçoivent les signalements en matière d'antisémitisme. Discours haineux en ligne et hors ligne, tags, profanation abjecte de cimetières. Nous ne pouvons et ne pourrons jamais l'accepter et nous devons renforcer sans cesse notre vigilance. Nous devons répondre à ces manifestations d'antisémitisme qui se greffent sur des discours ou des pensées qui n'ont en fait jamais totalement disparu. C'est ce à quoi nous travaillons dans un mécanisme interfédéral de lutte contre l'antisémitisme. À côté de la sécurité, l'éducation sera l'une de nos principales priorités. C'est important, tant pour le travail de mémoire que la prévention, dans un monde où les jeunes se nourrissent, on le sait, d'informations et d'images provenant parfois d'émetteurs qui cherchent à alimenter la haine et la vision. Nous devons garder le contact. Et dans ce travail, les sites et musées de l'Holocauste, tels que le musée d'Auschwitz en Pologne ou la caserne d'Ossat en Belgique, sont des outils importants. Non seulement ils permettent de préserver la mémoire des victimes de la Shoah et du Porajmos, mais ils constituent aussi un témoignage matériel de l'engrenage idéologique mis en place pour encourager le déni ultime de la dignité humaine de groupes considérés comme inférieurs. Une déshumanisation qui a conduit à la quasi-extermination des Juifs d'Europe. Ce rappel de l'histoire constitue un avertissement sur les nombreux dangers et les conséquences funestes des idéologies extrêmes. J'espère également que nous pourrons puiser dans ce travail de mémoire l'inspiration pour lutter sans relâche contre les violations des droits humains et toutes les formes d'incitation à la haine. La présidence belge, en étroite collaboration avec les 3 coordinatrices européennes, continuera dans cet état d'esprit de garantie des droits à faire progresser l'Europe dans la lutte contre toutes les formes de racisme, y compris l'antisémitisme. L'horizon peut paraître lointain, celui d'une société ouverte, véritablement non raciste, où chacun, chacune, quelle que soit son origine ou sa religion, a les mêmes chances réelles de vivre en sécurité, de s'épanouir, d'être en bonne santé et de contribuer à la société. Mais si l'horizon paraît lointain, quand il y a volonté, il y a chemin. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, Madame la secrétaire d'État. pour vos mots clairs et encourageants au début de la présidence de la Belgique en Europe. Now I have the pleasure to welcome the co-chairs of the Croatian presidency of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, Sarah Lustig and Ambassador Teresa Gras, under whose guidance the IHRA has adopted the Safeguarding Sites Charter, a relevant tool for the network of places where the Holocaust happened. And actually, we had a working group today with all member states and Jewish representatives present from across Europe. And this charter was explained as a tool not only for those who are dealing with the sites themselves and who have to therefore also do an important work in showing that it happened locally, but also as an educator's tool for schools and those who teach about sites. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katarina, for the introduction. Distinguished guests, excellencies, survivors and their families, dear colleagues and friends. I learned about Auschwitz for most of my life. I first saw it when I was 12 years old, in winter. It was freezing. And my father, who had survived the camp, said, "When you're older, you must see Birkenau in the spring. Only then will you understand." I first visited Birkenau in April 2011. I was invited to the March of the Living to address the third generation, the thousands of young people from all over the world who unite and walk from Auschwitz to Birkenau on Yom HaShoah. Everywhere, but especially around the Birkenau ash pond, there are endless, silent fields filled with tiny yellow flowers. These flowers thrive next to gas chamber walls where nail marks still show the desperation of prisoners trying to claw their way up towards air, not even realizing that these were their final moments. And I understood then what my father meant. At Birkenau, life and death coexist, just as they did in the gray zone of the Holocaust, that there is always proof of life, even at sites of certain death. On that day, as I addressed the third generation in the name of the second, I felt great optimism. These young people, just like the yellow flowers, they embody proof of life. Their commitment to Holocaust education and remembrance, and the symbolism of the March of the Living, and its contrast to the death marches, they are the future of remembrance. Ladies and gentlemen, to understand the significance of the March of the Living, we must understand the death marches. On 18 January 1945, nearly 60,000 prisoners were forcibly evacuated from the Auschwitz camp system. More than 15,000 people died during the marches, and the snow engulfed their skeletal corpses. Others left Auschwitz in the same way they had arrived, once again loaded onto cattle cars and deported to camps such as Bergen-Belsen, a journey of 935 kilometers to die from typhus, or in my father's case, be liberated by the British forces. To understand the willpower of the third generation, we must try to comprehend how a person retains humanity after endless, systematic attempts at extermination. How many times can one person be humiliated, persecuted, deported, starved, tortured, frozen, yet live in such extreme uncertainty? The March of the Living recreates the defiance and the resilience of the survivors. These young people march to reclaim the disempowerment of the Jewish people during the Shoah. But without the authentic site, this would not be possible. Between 1933 and 1945, the Nazis, the Allies, and their collaborators established more than 42,000 camps, incarceration sites, and ghettos across Europe. Like Auschwitz-Birkenau, these sites contain millions of stories, a warning from our collective history that the unthinkable is always possible. Today, we are concerned that not one of these sites is entirely safeguarded. We are shocked that 1 in 20 Europeans has never heard of the Holocaust. Anti-Semitism did not end with liberation or in 1945. Today, we are experiencing an unprecedented rise of anti-Semitism throughout Europe and beyond. Even memorials to those murdered during the Holocaust are targets of this growing hatred. We have all gone to great lengths to preserve the survivors' universal legacy in order to prevent a similar abyss of civilization from reoccurring. However, have we done enough?
Esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, allowing Holocaust sites to fall into ruin or become victims of vandalism or other external threats is the first step in dismantling the foundations of our societies. If we let the walls crumble and the stories within them lose their meaning, we are sending the message that this ideology is acceptable and that this history is no longer important. If the stories of the Holocaust are abandoned and protected in the places where they happened, their impact will continue to resonate for generations to come. In this way, sites will teach future generations that anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred are incompatible with Europe's core values and represent a threat to our democratic, pluralistic societies. This is why countering Holocaust distortion and combating anti-Semitism is not just about protecting the past. It is about protecting the present, and most importantly, it is about protecting the future. We cannot stand here today and say we are as optimistic as we were in 2011. In a world where Jewish people are removing mezuzahs from their doors and not sending their children to Jewish schools or campuses out of fear, the echoes of the Holocaust's ethical lessons are hauntingly relevant. The European Commission and its strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life bears the torch for the action that must be taken. Although we may not be as optimistic as we were back in 2011, we are determined, because today we are honored to launch the IHRA Charter for Safeguarding Sites, which was recently adopted by all 35 IHRA member countries in Zagreb. This is a powerful tool to protect the record of the Holocaust. The IHRA Charter lays out safeguarding principles, practices, responsibilities, and common threats to sites, thus enabling them to continue to authenticate history in the same way the survivors did. We are aware that nothing and no one will ever replace the survivors and the witnesses of the Holocaust, for they remain the only true experts of the most documented genocide in history. However, the sites do speak if we listen. It will take time for us to learn how to interact with them, and for now, we must start to speak their language. Today, as we launch the Charter for Safeguarding Sites, we begin that journey. We do it with ownership, we do it with purpose, and we do it together. We ask you all to join us in this journey to safeguard sites, to implement the Charter, to share it in your networks. And as we do so, we think about those victims and survivors who are no longer with us. We cling to the stories they told us. We remember the lives they lived in places where death was imminent, and we march forward. May their memory live on, woven throughout the more than 42,000 sites across Europe. May it forever be a pillar that combats anti-Semitism and counters Holocaust distortion. May it be a blessing for the future, a future of remembrance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah and Teresa. Thank you for the invaluable work of IHRA and for our good collaboration in this field. Also for reminding us the importance of each member state and each country to take responsibility for the sites, because this is really what this is about as well. Our next speaker is Sergej Lagodinsky, member of the European Parliament and Vice Chair of the European Parliament Working Group on Combating Anti-Semitism. Please, Sergej, the floor is yours.
Thank you for this invitation and for the great job that you and your team has been doing for all those years. And I'm looking forward to continuing this fruitful cooperation for the benefit of Europe and of our democracy. This is the first time when I speak on the occasion of the 27th of January, and I am quite confident that the world learned little from the Holocaust. This is sobering. We live in a democracy, and I and many of us will do everything to defend the right of people in the European Union to demonstrate, to fight for various political causes, to walk our streets with flags, also with Palestinian flags, also for Palestinian cause. But the rage in the streets, the false news and fake news in social media, the cheap hatred in worldwide government speeches that triggers old classical anti-Jewish sentiment, ignoring Jewish victims, ignoring Jewish women's rights, ignoring Jewish women's lives, and yes, ignoring Jews' ability to defend themselves, firing Jewish team captains from sports events, like it happened in South Africa, detaining Israeli soccer players, like it happened in Turkey. All of this has nothing to do with justified cause of Palestinian people and defending this cause, something which we share, but not this way. We must speak about the plight of Palestinians, about the responsibility of Israel to minimize victims. We must talk about Israel's duty to abide by humanitarian law and by the political commitment to a two-state solution. But legitimate discussion stops, and hate begins, where Jews are not granted a right that all others claim for themselves, a right to safety, and a right to act in a dilemma where one thing is not recognized, a dilemma, the complexity, where dilemmas are not recognized, where complexities are substituted with simplicities, and simplicities with prejudice. That's where legitimate discussion stops, and where hatred begins. October 7th was not Auschwitz, but it was something that Jews had been experiencing for thousands of years. It was a pogrom, with killings, murdering children, raping women. Something that Jews have been suffering for thousands of years, and one thing has changed after the Holocaust. Jews learned not to suffer and continue living. They learned that they can respond, and that they can be protected in democracies, and that they can act in democracies, and yes, that they can act also in Israel. These are the lessons, some of the lessons from Auschwitz and from the Holocaust. And it pains me that these lessons are not recognized anymore, also in some of our democracies. Because if we forget the biggest achievement that we were able to create as democracies in the past 80 years, then everything is possible. And this cannot happen. Something is fundamentally wrong with this world, with a world that cannot master both. Mourn Palestinian people and victims, and recognize victims of Jews, and recognize the complexities with which both people are confronted and are struggling. What is this fundamentally wrong if we look at the world? I don't want to use the word which starts with A. I've always said that political complexities and also the Near East conflict is more complex than to be explained by a simple word, anti-Semitism. But the recent developments have given me pause. And I don't have this clear answer to myself and to others anymore. Where there is darkness, there is light, and the light is here. The light, the commissioners who are so passionate, enthusiastic about projects and initiatives. The light are those projects and initiatives in Poland and in Hungary, in Germany, in Eastern Germany, where it is especially difficult to be a Democrat today. The light are hundreds and thousands of people who are walking and marching the streets of Germany in order to say, no, we are not going to give in our democracies for right-wingers and for extremists. There is a lot of light, but it's gotten a little bit less than a year ago. And I do hope that remembering is one, not the only, but one of the recipes on how we would bring more light in a year when we meet here again.
Thank you very much, Sergei Lagodinsky. Thank you for your words. And now it is my pleasure for Ambassador Dani Dayan to conclude this round of opening, who is the chairman of Yad Vashem, as I said before, and not only we at the European Commission, but also many member states represented here turn to Yad Vashem when it is about education and knowledge about the Holocaust. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Katerina. Holocaust survivors, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to share with you the story of a Jewish teenager from The Hague, Netherlands, who later lived here in this city, in Brussels. His name was Maurice, or by his Hebrew name, Moshe Flinker. Moshe Flinker was born in 1926. In 1942, after the Germans, aided by the Dutch police, began rounding up Jews for deportation, Moshe fled with his family to Belgium. While in Brussels, 16-year-old Moshe kept a diary. By reading the diary, which was discovered by his sisters after the war and published by Yad Vashem, by reading that diary, we encounter the dilemmas and hardships that Moshe Flinker faced daily, as well as his hopes and his dreams. From the diary, we know, for instance, that Moshe began to teach himself Arabic, so that one day, after he moves to the land of which he dreamed, the land of his ancestors, the land of Israel, he could become a diplomat for peace. On the entry dated December 8th, 1942, Moshe wrote, and I quote, "During the past few days, Mom raised the question of my future. When I was alone, I began to ponder this matter myself. What indeed is to become of me? It is obvious that the present situation, the war, will not last forever, perhaps another year or two. But what will happen then? One day I will have to earn my own living. After much deliberation," writes Moshe, "I've decided to become a statesman." Yes, a statesman. Like many of you here, representing your nations in this distinguished hall, Moshe aspired to become a leader, a diplomat, a statesman, to help influence society and shape public policy, to create a better world. Moshe Flinker did not become a statesman. He did not become a diplomat. Moshe Flinker never reached his 17th birthday. On April 7th, 1944, Pesach Eve, Passover Eve, the Flinker family, instead of celebrating the Passover Seder, was arrested by the Gestapo in Brussels, here in this city. Moshe and his parents were deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau, where they were murdered. Moshe Flinker was only one of 1.5 million Jewish children who were murdered during the Shoah. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, addressing you here as chairman of Yad Vashem, I think of the wonderful but unfulfilled dreams of this talented young man whose aspirations for himself, for his people, and for humanity were so brutally denied by extreme, murderous, anti-Semitic hatred. The stories, the dreams, the ideas of Moshe Flinker and of all of the 6 million Jewish victims of the Shoah inspire and energize us to carry out our shared responsibility to commemorate their identities in each of our countries and worldwide. That sense of responsibility was certainly a key motivator in the development and presentation in October 2021 of the European Commission's first EU strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life. We applaud the European Union, the European Commission. We applaud you, Katerina, for that endeavor. It is a significant document, thoughtfully and painstakingly prepared out of true commitment to combat anti-Semitism and to upholding such European values, such European way of life, Deputy President, as democracy, pluralism, tolerance, and human rights. The strategy includes substantial and appropriate activities and frameworks devoted to Holocaust research, education, and commemoration. And rightly, the EU strategy prioritizes the protection and fostering of Jewish cultural, religious, and communal life in the member states now and in the future. But the plan, the strategy to be effective should not be only implementable, but implemented. And for that reason, dear Katerina, I was so honored to be today, this morning, this noon, in the working group in order to implement that plan. When guests, dignitaries, leaders of countries, cities, institutions come to Yad Vashem very frequently, almost every day, they utter the words, "Never again." Each time I hear a leader, an administrator, say those words, I reflect, are they sincere? Do they really mean never again? Are they willing to back up their words practically, ceaselessly? Or they are really only mouthing a shallow cliché, the expected thing to say in Yad Vashem at a certain time, at a certain place, but devoid of any real substance? If we have learned anything from the pain and suffering of the Jews during the previous century, it is that anti-Semitism must be forcefully confronted the moment it shows its first ominous signs. Otherwise, it can metastasize into monstrous dimensions, as we witnessed again with deep shock and pain on October 7th and since. So my litmus test to know the sincerity is whether the country, the province, the city, the institution that leader that comes to Yad Vashem and says never again leads has an implementable and implementable plan to combat anti-Semitism. If they have one, I know they are sincere. If they lack one, they may be, just may be, mere hypocrisy. And when I say anti-Semitism, I mean anti-Semitism in all its forms. It's very easy for a right-winger to condemn and fight left-wing anti-Semitism, and it is very easy for a left-winger to condemn and fight right-wing anti-Semitism. Neo-Nazi anti-Semitism should be confronted forcefully, vigorously, and calls for the annihilation of the Jewish state, whether they come from the halls of government in Tehran, or from the halls in the Sorbonne, or from Trafalgar Square, should be confronted with the same fashion. Countering such savage hatred requires knowledge and ingenuity, but also, and probably especially, profound determination and absolute courage. In closing, I would like to get back to Moshe Flinker's diary. Moshe Flinker, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be blessed. On May 19th, 1943, he wrote, I now understand, think about it, he was 16. I now understand that ideas and thoughts are worthless if we cannot convert them into action. For in life, one cannot be neutral. Moshe Flinker at 16 teaches us such deep ideas that I hope we will be worthy of receiving them. I only can think which huge statesman could have become of Moshe Flinker. How wise and prophetic this young Jewish martyr from The Hague and Brussels was, and how remarkably relevant for us here today his entries in the diary were. Mere statements or ceremonies are equivalent to inaction, and inaction is equivalent to complicity. We are challenged by the memory of the Holocaust to translate our beliefs and words into effective, consistent action. And now I will ask one question. Will Europe's leaders and civil societies rise successfully to meet that challenge? I cannot answer that question. Only you can answer it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Dayan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to you and to all our opening speakers. My name is Jackie Davis. I am chairing with Katerina this evening the moderating duties at this ceremony. We are going to pause at several moments during this conference for some reflection, and we have a great deal to reflect on after those very powerful and eloquent speeches by all our opening speakers. And in each time, we want to give you some music while you think. Our first musical interlude, Frédéric Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor for violin and piano, will be performed by Renaud Krols on the violin and Rebecca Boyer on the piano. Please, ladies and gentlemen, will you welcome them on stage? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed for that beautiful, beautiful music. Our next speaker this evening has already been mentioned by the Vice President in his opening speech and by Katarina. She is a remarkable lady, Regina Schlutzny. She's a Holocaust survivor, born in Antwerp on the 25th of September 1939 into a Jewish Orthodox family, who was hidden in the home of Sharel and Anna Jacobs van Dijk in Hemiksem during the Holocaust from 1942 to 1945. In the 1990s, she became involved in memory work about World War II and about the Shoah, and later became president of the association The Hidden Child. In recognition of her work, she was made a baron by the King of Belgium, Philippe, in July 2022. Regina, it is wonderful to have you with us. Regina will be in conversation with Katharina von Schnurbein, and I am delighted to welcome both of them to the stage. So please sit there, yes. Here.
Regina, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much that you found time in your busy schedule, because you visit countless schools and events like this to tell your story. And we, the Belgians, the Belgian schools and teachers, but also we here at the European Commission, we owe you a great thanks and gratitude for this, for sharing your story. Your story was recently published in a book that you have with you. It is the story of you and your husband, who also survived as a hidden child. And we would like to talk a bit about your survival, maybe also his, and how you actually survived. And maybe also a very personal question, what impact that had on your marriage, that both of you had that background. Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor. My both parents came from Poland, and my father was cured because he had skin cancer. And that time, in 1930, in Poland, they didn't know what he had, and in Belgium, his uncle found a Professor van Runkelen, who cured him. It took 2 years, and after that he went back to Warsaw to marry the lady who would become my mom. And when he came back to Belgium, because his uncle had promised him to help him out to find work, he couldn't bring his wife because he didn't have any money and he didn't have any work. And he had to prove that he could support her. So it took him nearly more than a year. When she came to Belgium, in 1932, my elder brother was born. And in 1937, my second brother, and as you heard, I was born September 1939. Not the best time to get born. So we lived in Antwerp. We tried to go to England, but the last ship was departed before we arrived there, and it was actually the German soldiers who brought us back to Antwerp, where there was nothing left in our apartment. Everything was taken out. And my father, with the help of my eldest brother, who knew some Flemish because he went to school in Antwerp, they wrote a letter to the town hall to tell them we don't have anything anymore. And by surprise, they got money from the authorities. It is with that money that we could leave Antwerp and go in hiding to Hemixem. Now, we came in a cafe house, and the only one who could go down out of the room was me. And you see me as 4 years. It was already after I was there more than a year. I could go down and play behind the house because I was blonde. I didn't have black hair like my brothers. They couldn't come out of the room. And in the wall between the house where we were hidden with Madame Pauldine, there was a hole in between the two houses, and I could go from one house to the other one. Now, Anna and Charles, they had a shop, a food shop, and they were people who had no children that time and never had any children. They had me in the war and afterwards. But Anna had 2 cats, and she would give the same food for her cats because that were her babies. Then she would prepare for Charles, her husband, and for herself. Now, we didn't have enough food, and probably I was very hungry one day, and I tried to steal the food of the cats. I didn't know that Anna was standing behind the curtain in her room and saw that this little one of 2.5 years was going to steal the food of the cats. So she came out, and from that day on, she gave food to me for my parents, my 2 brothers, and for me. Because she understood right away that a child of 2.5 years doesn't take food out of animals, because when you're that age, you love cats and dogs. So we thought that we were very safe there, but we weren't. Somebody understood that we were hiding. And you see on the picture my grandmother, the little picture is my grandmother from my father, and the gentleman on the right-hand side is the uncle who took in my father, and by taking him in and taking him to Professor Warunkele, he was cured. So somebody denounced us, but we are very lucky that the mayor of Hemixem, where the officer, the German officer, came to tell him that he had to come and take these Jews to Dossin. He had a son of 12, and he asked the son to go with the message to Charles, the people of the shop, and tell them that they had to flee as quick as possible by the back door. He would come in the front, control the people who were standing there in the cafe, drinking beer and telling stories. It would give my parents and the children to leave by the back door. When he comes in, Charles, he says, Mr. and Mrs. Schlusny, take whatever you brought from Antwerp. Take your big boys. If you want, you can leave the little one with us, because we have a room ready for when we will have a baby. I don't know how long it took my parents to decide, but a lot of time they didn't have. They had to go out as quick as possible, and they left me there. I knew Anna because she gave me food, but that was it. Probably I must have cried a few days or weeks, I can't remember. And Charles said, if you find a good place, you think you are safe, you can come and pick up the little one. Well, my parents had to change their hiding place 15 times, only in the night, because my father, with the scar on his face, was people could recognize him very easily. So they changed every time, only in the night. And you see on the right-hand side my mother and my father who brought me to this world. And Anna and Charles on the left-hand side, who keep me in life, where I was supposed to be taken and not be sitting here today to tell my story. I stayed with Anna and Charles because they never came to pick me up during the war. But when the war was finished, Charles right away wrote to my mom to come and take me home. Now, you can ask, how did Charles know that? Well, Charles would go regularly during the war and bring food to my parents out of the shop. And for many, many years, I was asking myself, how could Charles find my parents? Well, lately, somebody found letters from a gentleman who denounced us. And he writes, Charles was with the resistance. And that's how he knew where to find my parents. I never knew that. He never talked about it. It's only like 3-4 years that I know about this story. When the lady came in, and I say the lady, because I didn't recognize my mom. I was 2.5 when she had to leave me, and 6 when she picked me up. Charles said, "That's your mother, and you can go home." And I thought, going home? I'm home. Luckily for me, my mom said to Anna and Charles, "How can we ever thank you for what you did?" And the only thing these wonderful, wonderful people asked, don't take her away completely from us. And my mom, even that she was a very Orthodox lady, she said every weekend she can come and stay with you. So I went with my mom home, didn't recognize my father, didn't recognize my 2 brothers, and hardly understood these people because they were speaking Yiddish. And what I was speaking was Flemish. So I had to learn Yiddish to speak with my own people. I went to an Orthodox school and be the Orthodox kid from these wonderful people, to go to another pair of wonderful parents and forget that I'm Jewish every weekend, because there was no kosher food. They didn't know anything what it meant to be Jewish. They just were that good that when a family was despair and they needed help, they just did it. And I went to them every weekend till I was 14. Never spoke about it, because in the Orthodox school they would have thrown me out to be on Shabbat with non-Jewish people. And then I wanted to meet some other Jewish children, because only in school there was only girls, no boys. And they made a choir, a Jewish choir in Antwerp. So I asked my mom if I could go to the choir. I didn't tell everything. Didn't lie, but I didn't tell everything. I didn't tell that there was also boys, because for an Orthodox girl, my mom would not have let me go to the choir.
You saw it at the performance?
She never came to any. No, no. Orthodox people are not coming to performance when there's boys and girls together. But she gave me the permission, and that's where I met my husband. And we were 1958. And in 1960, we got married. And my husband, George, was also a hidden child who didn't have the luck that I had to find back my parents and my brothers, because he was left out from 7 people: his grandparents, his parents in Auschwitz, his sister, his uncle, and his aunt. So for him, in our family, when we had children, a boy and a girl, it was George who was the hidden child. I didn't feel like being a hidden child because I went to my family every weekend. And when I got married, I went every Sunday with the husband and with the children. So it was, for me, I never thought that I was a hidden child, till one of the committee people from the Hidden Children, l'Enfant Caché, got in touch with me and asked if I would come and make part of the committee. Then I realized that I was a hidden child. Before that, I had made the files for the people who hid my husband's parents and grandparents before they were taken or got killed by the bombardments in Namur, the grandparents from the Americans who came to help, and his sister also. And in 2010, I realized that Charles and Anna, I've never had made a file for Yad Vashem to make them honored. So here you see the grandchild of Anna's sister, who got all the papers from Yad Vashem to honor these people, because they were the ones who had really need to be done. And it was done in Hemixem, where the Germans, the soldier Germans, were in the war, in that house. So at least I didn't forget them. But when they died, I was the daughter who buried them because there was no other one. So I have 2 tombs in Hemixem, who still exist after 15 years. And my parents, when they passed away, were taken to Jerusalem, to Har HaZitim.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes. I know that usually your story, and I've heard it, is much longer and in much more detail. It is very deep, and also the way you have this love for these 2 parents and continued throughout your life. We have a bit of time left, and I would like to ask you 2 questions. One is, you started to tell your story late, and you already gave a hint of why that was. But also, what can we learn from Charles and Anna? Because in a recent meeting that we had, you said a sentence that really touched me to the core, where you said, I don't want to live in hiding anymore with the situation today. Yeah, where you have to hide your Star of David again, or you hide your identity. So what can we learn? What do you expect of civil society, of policymakers, of the European Commission, of the country in which you live, to not have to be in hiding?
Well, I never had any problems till a few years ago, when it started, the anti-Semitism came up more and more again. I was the only Jewish girl in the class, and I had never, ever anybody who said the wrong word. I think if you are proud to be whatever you are, because we don't choose the family or the parents. Nobody can choose them. The first thing you can do is honor your parents and be proud of what you are. And by doing that, I had till tonight never anything till yesterday. Sorry, and I'll tell you why. Anybody who said no to me if I wanted to tell my story in school, in groups. Last night, I got a telephone from a teacher who invited me to come next week to 2 schools in Antwerp. And she said, I've got sad news. The director asked not to come. It's the first time after more than 15 years that I go to the schools. And she said the teacher, the Muslim teacher, made a big problem with the director, and he didn't have any choice than just to say no. I want to tell you there is 8 schools, public schools in Antwerp, who have the same problem. A few Jewish children are going to school there, and since the 7th, they have problems. Well, this is something who can't happen. We have to learn, we have to teach the teachers, because they don't know enough about the problem. They hear the news. We had a meeting with the Flemish television and news people, VRT, and we told them, you invite me because I was on television, a few of you must have seen me, but it's only drops of Jewish people who are invited against the other side. And they don't get the time to explain. It's only one-sided. That's what we feel as Jewish people in Antwerp. And that has to change. We're going to put up some papers, sit with the teachers, go to the schools, and I think it's something we have to do, and I hope that IHRA will be very pleased with that.
Yes. Yes, indeed. I think we must not let down on education, and the book ends with Zachor, remember, and it is indeed, I think, the core of everything you do and you are. Thank you so much for being this wonderful person, for honoring us here with your story and your presence, and blessings to you and your family.
Thank you. And without memory, there's no future.
Yes.
And that's what I say to the children in school.
Remember the past, shaping the future.
Thank you very much indeed, Regina, Katarina. Thank you. That was absolutely wonderful, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And as we reflect on what we heard from Regina there, we are going to have another musical interlude, and this time we are going to hear a song by a Holocaust victim, Ilse Weber. And our singer, Sarina Kohn, has asked me to tell you a little bit about Ilse before she sings. Ilse was a feminist writer, and she wrote songs and stories for children, mainly for girls, for Jewish girls. And she was in the camp at Theresienstadt, where she was taking care of the children. And then the day came when she was told to take the children to the showers. And she did so. When they arrived at the showers, she sang them the lullaby that you are about to hear. And survivors from that camp remember and still told the story for many years after of hearing that singing from the showers. Serena, thank you so much for being with us. Let's hear the lullaby. Thank you so very much. For a very beautiful song, very beautifully performed as we remember Ilse Weber and those children. We heard in the opening session how important the sites where the Holocaust happened are for remembrance, if we are truly to remember the past and shape the future. And we also heard from Vice President Skinas about the planned new network of sites where the Holocaust happened, being launched tonight at this event, and the new Charter for Safeguarding Sites developed by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance that Sarah Lustig and Theresia talked about so eloquently earlier on. In a few minutes, we're going to discuss what needs to be done to safeguard those sites and how everyone can work together to do that. But before we do that, we wanted to show you a short video to inspire our discussion from people who actually work at those sites. So let's watch that video.
What often surprises me is how little we know, how little I know about a site. For example, when you visit the place you grew up in, did you know there was a sub-camp or a forced labor camp or a concentration camp or killing sites nearby?
Buchenwald alone had almost 140 sub-camps.
To me, safeguarding sites means working with the people that are dedicated to keep the memory of the victims alive.
People arrive in Berlin, of course they know about the Holocaust, but actually going to a place like Sachsenhausen, that really makes it real.
Safeguarding Holocaust sites means action, educate, and enlighten people in some case.
I remember not only going there, but I remember what it felt like. I remember how difficult it was to go through that door or to know that this happened where I'm stood.
Safeguarding sites means that people protect artifacts and historic remains. It means that people research what actually happened at a place.
When I came to the site, I found out that there was a big farm built on almost top of the former so-called gypsy camp. No humane option to pay your respect to the victims of the concentration camp Lety Opisku.
If we don't invite questions, we don't really address issues of injustice.
Safeguarding sites is an educational experience for me, and I think that is the main goal in order to fight against hate speech, fight against discrimination.
Some visitors to our memorials will still write some horrible things to our books.
You've got a kind of megaphone to people who are spouting hate in the world, and that's why learning about the Holocaust is important as a lesson that really all forms of hatred and intolerance, they don't lead to anything good.
We have to care about those who died there, those who survived, those who were transported, and those whose families were ripped apart.
The tragedy of Auschwitz forces us to confront ourselves with the horrifying chapter of human history and challenges us to build a future founded on remembrance, free from anti-Semitism, racism, and many other ideologies of hatred, free from dehumanization.
To stop protecting places like this, it would be the first step on a path that leads to saying, well, these ways of thinking are actually okay.
A memorial to the Holocaust and its victims must not be finished.
We need to remain steadfast in our focus to achieve justice and memory.
Then we can learn how to be better, how to better communicate, how to better educate, and how to better include those parts of our society that are in minority. And I think that is our task. Our task as a majority to learn and to try to include all parts of society, so this will not happen ever again.
Our memory of looking back into the darkness can inspire a future grounded in compassion, understanding, freedom, and justice.
So underlining there why what we are discussing now is so very important to build a future founded on remembrance, as one of those workers said. But are we doing enough to safeguard those sites? Sarah Lustig and Theresia Grass indicated to us, no, we're not, and that's why they have launched this charter. Are we doing enough? And if we're not, what needs to be done and who needs to do what? I'm delighted to welcome to discuss this Laurent Moïse, who is president of the Luxembourg Foundation of the Memory of the Shoah and has a key role in the project Cinq Fontaines, which is an ex-convent where Jews interned before deportation to concentration camps is now dedicated to the memory of victims of the Shoah. I'm sure he will tell you more. Laurent, do please come and sit next to me. Simonetta Della Seta, who is chair of the Museums and Memorials Working Group of IHRA, and she's an advisor to the Italian authorities and founder of the National Museum of Italian Judaism and the Shoah, MAIS. Very warm welcome, Simonetta. And last but not least, Veerle van den Dalen, who is chair of the IHRA project monitoring access to Holocaust collections. She's curator and director of collections and research at the Kazerne Dossin in Mechelen, the Holocaust Memorial Museum there. And she's coordinator of the data identification and integration work package for the European Holocaust research infrastructure, so also focusing on preserving that archival record as well. We've heard from all our opening speakers and in that video why, for them, preserving sites matters. Margarita Skinner said at the beginning, he said, preserving the memory and lessons of the Shoah must remain the starting point for everything we do. And Sarah Lustig said, they remind us that the unthinkable is always possible. I was very struck also what Theresia said when she said, the sites do speak to us if we listen. For you, and Laurent, let me start with you, why for you is it so important that we focus on this? And do you believe we are doing enough? Or are you as concerned as IHRA are that more needs to be done to stop these sites degrading even further and indeed many being abandoned?
Well, we are experiencing a shift, a slow shift from testimonies from survivors to history. What that means is that the past is at a wider distance. This means that for younger generations, history is nothing alive anymore. It's not what their parents experience, etc. It's even further. So, and you have a lot of young people who are not from the different countries they live in. They are immigrating from other areas, so they don't have the same historical experience. So in that way, I think it's very important that they have something concrete in front of their eyes, that they see what happened. Because if you just tell the story, it's not the same, it's not their story.
Indeed not. Indeed not. Simonetta, for you, why does this matter so much, and what for you is the central challenge that we face if we are to preserve, to safeguard these sites?
Thank you. Unfortunately, we all know that we are approaching an era without direct testimonies. And the survivors and those who are with us, and I really thank you so much for being with us and for speaking to us. So the survivors are leaving, and we need to make the sites speak and become live testimonies of what it was, of death and life and of what happened there. And this is a must in this time. It's a must to get together, work together, cross references, bring documentations and what the survivors told us to the sites and let the sites speak.
Thank you very much. And Viola, if we are to make the sites speak, what's the central challenge that we need to address?
Well, I think we must ensure that the human dignity of the victims comes to the fore and speaks to us again. Because these victims, if we just give numbers, it doesn't speak to us. If we hear from Moshe Flinker, if we hear from the other stories, they come alive. Many of these sites are the places where the victims lost their humanity, where their humanity was taken away from them. They entered many of the sites, like the transit camps, with their name, and they came out as a number on a transport to, very often, Auschwitz-Birkenau, bringing that humanity, that dignity, the human dignity back to the victims, and encourage not only the victim communities, but our whole society to commemorate and to commemorate their lives and their humanity, their lives. That is, I think, one of the ways that we have to work with the sites to let them speak and to indeed preserve this memory and keep it alive and transmit it to next generations. Because there is no cemetery for these people. There's no place to mourn. The sites play an important role and need to play that role in a very serene and dignified way.
And your memorial, your museum, Kaserne Dosin, what do you believe we can learn from the work that you're doing there about how we do this most effectively, how we preserve these sites?
Well, I think we cannot think that the walls or the sites themselves can do the speaking. You also need to have the archives, the research, so many experts that need to be connected to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. That requires expertise, that requires international cooperation, that requires a lot of effort to work on this. And I think in our sites, we need to really work on ensuring that we transmit this, but that we also allow for people to feel welcome, to come there and to do bottom-up approaches as well, so that we can curate the needs of civil society so that it becomes a living memory and not an imposed duty of remembrance, but a self-chosen a duty of education and remembrance. And I think that requires all of society.
I just want to come to Laurent Simonetta, and then I will come to you, because Laurent as well at Cinq-Fontaines. What do you believe we can learn from your approach? What has made this project so effective, so successful, and the challenge that you face?
There are many challenges because Cinq-Fontaines was not known even by people living in Luxembourg. Most of the people didn't know about it. It was a kind of transit camp, let's say a first gate to Auschwitz, Theresienstadt, etc. But most people didn't know this place. And if they knew this place, they didn't know what happened. There was some memorial there, but that's all. And the Luxembourg state decided to purchase the site and to transform it in a memorial and educational site. So this is one big challenge that we face today, and we have to have the infrastructure, but also to put content in it. And I think all what we discussed today is very important, because this is also a very interesting experience to know how other sites work, how they work together, and that's important for Cinq-Fontaines.
Thank you. Simonetta, the challenges that we face, they're identified very clearly in the new charter. Looks at them very closely. How do you see those challenges? And picking up on Viola's point about, she said, we need a lot of cooperation, we need a lot of expertise. Who needs to do what?
But let me refer one moment to what she said, that we are protecting and respecting the dignity of the victims. I think we're also respecting our dignity by enhancing and bringing to life these sites, recognizing the sites. I mean, we do have a huge challenge these days, which is distortion, Holocaust distortion. So the moment we bring these sites back to their correct narrative, we will be able to tell stories. Imagine that you're traveling from a train station and you realize and you get to know that from that specific place, hundreds and thousands of people were deported to death. You raise awareness. Imagine you go through a wood and you take a hike and you just get into a place and you realize that that was a mass grave and it's written and you can learn about this. We raise awareness. You know, imagine all these things together. We have so many ways we need to raise awareness for the new generations.
And to do that, how do you see the role of all the different people who need to be involved? Civil society organizations, through local authorities, national governments, international organizations. How do we get this collective effort that you're all underlining is so important?
This is such a good question. Thank you. I mean, first of all, we need to convince national authorities, local authorities, Jewish organizations, and all those involved that this is one thing and we have to do it together. We have to cooperate, and it has to be a very robust cooperation. And the second thing, which is a must, we have to refer to the expert community. Imagine that a local authority can have access to experts. because most of the distortion comes from ignorance, and we need to fight against ignorance, and we really need to create this network, and it's a network of knowledge, and the knowledge stays where expertise is there. You need to learn, you need to have experience. And if you bring together national authorities and local authorities, Jewish organizations, but with a very good agreement and with law and with regulations, everything has to be very well conceived, of course.
Laurent,
the charter is a good thing.
You mentioned one of the roles for public authorities. You said the purchase. In order to do what you are doing. But how do you broadly see the role of public authorities? Is it about providing the money, but are there other things as well to do with this awareness raising, to do with bringing all this expertise together? How do you see their role?
Yes, of course, funding is essential, but it's not the only important point. I think education is also a very important point. We spoke about ignorance. If we have to speak about education, you have in most of the countries a Ministry of Education which should be involved in it also. Many other authorities, local authorities, because sometimes the sites are linked to a special place in a city or in a specific area. So I think it's a kind of public-private partnership, if you like, on a great scale, involving national authorities, but also local authorities.
And Vera, you talked about international cooperation. Why is that so important?
Well, because everything is interconnected. The victims, their history is international. So there's so many sources for which you need to know 40+ languages in order to put the story of one side together. So that requires not only reaching out to various experts who have this expertise in various languages, but also to connect with the places where people came from, to connect to places where people were deported to, and to bring all that expertise together is something that really requires a lot of effort, because it requires us often to also have English as a common language to speak about this, to exchange information, to bring information about the sources about the victims together, like the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure, to also convince all the respective governments who have the sources in their respective countries to open up those sources, to give access to this past and to allow us to make that connection, because it really goes from the very local place where you are as a site to the whole world, really.
So on that point, and I'll come to the Charter and the role of the Charter in a moment, but first, the network of sites where the Holocaust happened that Margarita Skinnis launched tonight, that call to establish the Secretariat. Viola, just following up on that, how important do you think that would be? Simonetta, Laurent, how important will it be to create this network?
Well, I think the network can be of extreme importance if it can deliver concrete outputs and concrete things that people can work on together. As was mentioned during the speeches, just giving words and voicing intentions is one thing, but to really make it happen, to make it tangible, to make it concrete, is where we can get the most out of these type of networks. Because we need to learn, how do you deal with such painful, traumatic pasts in a serene way? Because in these sites, as I mentioned, since there is no cemetery, we are actually on the place where we mourn the victims, and that requires special attention to how you deal with history and public outreach and education on these very sites with respect for that human dignity. And that's something where communities can strengthen us all in our work in our respective sites.
Thank you, Simonetta. The role of this network, and also perhaps now bring in also how you see the role of the new IHRA Charter.
First of all, the network is so much needed, and I want to thank all of you for all the efforts that you will put in this. And it's needed. And the IHRA Charter for safeguarding sites, it's a great guide. It's a shining guide for this, because you can really, you are guided how to recognize a site. You're guided how to understand the significance of the site. You're guided how to use the site. You're guided how to bring heritage to the site, how to bring even experts to the site. So it almost goes together, because if we're going to have a network, this tool that came out this year from IHRA is a diamond. It's something that is really is just for this.
Thank you very much indeed. Laurent, for you, the importance of a network and the importance of this charter, how would you use it? How do you think you'll be able to use it in your work?
We heard before that it is a tool, and it's a very important tool. I think it's a way also how to share experience, how to share best practices. When you have this network, you can use these tools. You can also learn from errors that some did before, etc., etc. So in that way, I think it's very important to know how to deal with all these problems, because even 80 years after the Second World War, we still learn new things, even in the research area, for example. We're not at the end of our wisdom.
Indeed not. And Viola, you talked about the network, but the charter for you, how can you use that in your work?
Well, I think the Charter points us at very many aspects of our work, and it makes us aware of the challenges that we are facing. And hearing that there's no site that is fully ideally preserved also makes us aware that we all are struggling to get there, and that it needs a community to see how we can make the best of it and how we can continue learning from the experts, learning from what civil society tells us. We have at this moment a project, Every Name Matters, where people come to our site to record the name of one deportee, one person, one deportee. That brings to us so many people who are genuinely motivated to commemorate, and then to see how we can build this site in cooperation with so many others that work effortlessly to honor the human dignity of the victims. That is what we need to preserve the memory, to pass it on with people who really are themselves motivated to pass the torch, to continue to remember.
And Simonetta, and a final question to you all, of course, reminding us when we talk about the state of some of these sites, that this is urgent. So for each of you, and I want to start with you, Simonetta, if you had to identify the key next step, the next thing we need to do, the Charter contains a lot of actions, a lot of things that need to be done, the network is being built. What for each of you, starting with you, Simonetta, is the key next step?
The first action, spread the news. We have a charter. The charter can be translated, localized, and the charter can give a lot of expertise can bring expertise to sites. So this is crucial. This is the call. We can share the news. We have a tool, and we can use this tool. Yes, most of the sites do have all kinds of risks, of problems. Can be the climate change, can be lack of financial support, lack of knowledge, lack of people coming. But if we do not start, we will never recover them, and we will never enjoy them. And when I say enjoy, we're speaking about the Holocaust and victims and death, but there's also a lot of life in what we're doing. There's a lot of life, and this is the time, we're approaching a time of history when we, as people working on the Holocaust, we can cross-cut information, we can bring interviews to the site, we can bring documentation. This is the time to do it.
Thank you. Laurent, your key next step, key priority?
I think it's a global aspect. It's making people aware that the sites are next to where they live. Yeah. And it's part of their history, because many people still don't know that. I think that's very important. And all these tools should help to tell the people, hey, this happened just at near your door. There were not many reactions at the time. So how would you react today? Think of the young generations today. I think that's the top priority.
Thank you, Viola.
Well, I think awareness and funding on all the levels of governments, from very local to regional to national to international, because that's what we need, the awareness, so that basically one also sees the need to provide sufficient budget, because you cannot preserve a site without sufficient budget. You cannot provide sufficient and good educational tools if there's no budget there. And because I think it's the combination of budget and awareness, because we heard about Moshe Flinker. He also writes in his diary how they very difficultly around Hanukkah during the war were able to buy some candles to celebrate the miracle of Hanukkah. If we want to bring light into this world, if we want to educate ourselves and commemorate and keep on lighting those lights, then I think that is of key importance.
Will you join me in thanking our speakers very much indeed? Thank you so much. Thank you. Please do make your way. Thank you so much. So Viola ended there talking about bringing light. And we are going to move indeed to our commemoration ceremony, a commemoration ceremony which has particular poignancy and powerfulness this year. Against the stark backdrop that we heard so much about in our opening speeches and that are in our thoughts all the time. So could I ask those who do have a kippah, if you could now put it on? And as we move to the commemoration ceremony, and for this, I am welcoming to the stage the Chief Rabbi, Olivia Kaufman, for the prayers, El Malek Rachmamim, and the Kaddish. Chief Rabbi, if you could please join me.
במרומים המצא מנוחו נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות אוי קדושים הטהורים אוי קדושים הטהורים כזוהר רק ימזירים את נשמוס אחינו ואחיותינו אנשים, נשים, ילדים ויונקים שנהרגו, היי ושנשחטו, היי ושנחנקו, ושנקברו חיים במחנות השמדה באושוויץ, מיידנק, טרבלינקה ובשאר מחנות השמדה. כולם הוי קדושים הטהורים שנפלו על קידוש השם על ידי הנאצים, הגרמנים, האכזרים, הצוררים, יימח שמם וזכרם. הוי כולם קדושים וטהורים, בעבור שאנו מתפללים בצדקו בעד אזכורוס נשמוסום. אוי בגן עדן, אוי בגן עדן תהמנו חסם, לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בססר כנפיו לעולמים. אוי ויצרור, אוי ויצרור, אוי ויצרור ביצרור החיים. אוי ויצרור ביצרור החיים אתני שמוסום. אדוני ונחלוסום. אוי וינוחו על משכבם בשלום. ונאמר Amen. Éternel, toi qui résides dans les cieux, accorde un repos éternel sous les ailes de ta providence, à l'instar de nos kedoshim, des saints et des purs, qui brillent et étincellent comme la lumière du firmament, aux 6 millions d'âmes d'Israël, aux déportés, exterminés, assassinés parce que juifs pendant la Shoah, hommes, femmes, enfants, qui furent assassinés et brûlés dans les camps de la mort. Par cette prière portée par chacun d'entre nous toutes et tous, pour l'élévation de leurs âmes. Ô Père miséricordieux, recouvre-les de tes ailes à jamais, que leurs âmes soient protégées dans le faisceau de vie éternelle, que l'Éternel soit leur héritage, que le souvenir de leur opprobre ne s'efface jamais, et que leur mérite se pose en permanence sur chacun d'entre nous, sur nos enfants, nos petits-enfants de génération en génération, pour le peuple d'Israël, peuple juif, en terre d'Israël et en diaspora, et pour l'humanité toute entière. Ô terre, ne recouvre pas leur sang, que leur cri reste vivant en nous, qu'ils reposent en paix, et nous disons Amen. nous allons ensemble partager ce texte du Kaddish, qui n'est pas la prière des morts, mais qui est un acte de vie, un hymne à la vie, une sanctification de la vie plus fort que la mort. Yisgadal veyiskadash sheme rabo, be'olmo divro chiruse veyamlich malchuse, veyatzmar purkane vikarev meshiche, bechayechon uviomechon uvechaye dechol bes Yisroel, ba'agolo uvizman koriv ve'imru Amen. Yehe sheme rabo mevorach leolam uleolme olmayo. Yisborach veishtabar veispohar veisroimam veisnase veisadar veisale veisolal sheme dekucho berichu. Leelo min kol bichosa veshirosa. Tush bichosa venechemosa damiron beolmo veimru Amen. Yehe shlomo rabo min shemayo, v'chaim toivim olenu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. Ose shalom bimromov, u yaase shalom olenu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. Puissions-nous partager en haut et en bas la paix pour tout Israël et pour l'humanité tout entière. Amen.
We now move to the lighting of the candles, and I would like to ask Regina Schluzny to come forward to light the first candle for all Jewish victims. The rest of you, you may take a seat. Thank you. Regina, thank you very much. Please, will you light the first candle? I'd now like to ask Margarita Skinas, European Commission Vice President, to light the candle for the survivors of the Holocaust. For all the children murdered during the Nazi-led persecution, please, Marie-Colline Leroy, Secretary of State for Gender Equality, Equal Opportunities and Diversity of Belgium, please light the candle. For the victims and survivors of the genocide of the Roma, Ambassador Theresia Grass and Sarah Lustig. For the Jewish resistance, Sergei Lagodinsky, please. For further victims targeted by Nazi-led persecution and murder, including LGBTI and the disabled, Emma Halali, President of the European Union of Jewish Students. And for the righteous among the nations, Danny Dayan. And can I ask everyone to stand again, please, as we observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the Holocaust. Thank you very much indeed. Please be seated. Thank you to all of those who lit the candles for us. So before we close, we want to take a final moment to reflect on all that we have heard this evening, all the memories that have been shared, all the people, the victims we have spoken about. And our final musical interlude is from Jules Massenet, Thais, Meditation for Violin and Piano with Renaud and Rebecca again. for bringing our proceedings almost to a close so beautifully. And as we move towards the end of this evening, a very powerful, very moving evening of commemoration and remembrance, I'm going to hand over to Katerina in a moment to close, but just a couple of things I wanted to tell you before I do that. When you leave this room for the reception, you will see there are various areas where you can take photos against a backdrop to post on social media. There's also going to be photographers there who can take pictures for you. There will be candles with the names of victims of the Shoah at reception. Please do take one and light it, post it on social media. Each has a name of a Shoah victim on them. Please take it, light it, put it on social media with the story of that victim as we approach Holocaust Remembrance Day. So take those photos, and if you do post on social media, please use the hashtag #WeRemember. So now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Katharina von Schnurbein to bring proceedings to a close. Katharina, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. So, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of this very meaningful and special evening, I would like to sincerely thank again our partners, the Belgian EU Presidency, the IHRA. I would like to thank the speakers and also Rabbi Kaufmann for his very touching prayers, the musicians, and many thanks, of course, to Jackie Davis for her co-moderation. And finally, again, to you, Regine. It's wonderful, and yeah, you made this evening what it was. Thank you so much. A very special thanks goes also to my team, the anti-Semitism team, for making it all possible together with the contractor. Thanks a lot. I don't know where you are, but thank you very much. It is so important to remember. It is so important to remember those dark days, to pay tribute to the victims, share the pain of those who survived, and take an example from those who helped the survivors at the risk of their own lives. This is our sacred duty towards the Jewish people and towards anybody. Faced with the avalanche of anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred and prejudice, and with view to the super election year, including the European elections in June, it is a responsibility for all those in the room who cherish democracy, all those online, also freedom, the rule of law, to not stand by, but to stand up and to speak up for the value we hold dear. The fight against anti-Semitism is a fight for democracy, because never again is now. For those of you in the room, you can take the picture and please post it with the hashtag #WeRemember, and do not forget the Ner HaZikaron, the commemoration candle, and to light it on the 27th of January. You can also post it, and you can write the name of the person. In my case, it's Leib Podbereski, and therefore set a sign also. The Nazis did not win. The numbers were not the last word. Their names are the last word. I wish you a wonderful evening. Carry this with you. There is a reception outside. Thank you very much and good night.
Serena, you were marvelous. It was beautiful. And what a beautiful story. Beautiful.